All right. Linda, could you please call the roll?
Senator French. Senator Hicks.
Here.
Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator Kolb.
Present.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Here. And Senator French is excused for now. Hopefully he'll make it here in a little while. Welcome, everyone, to the Senate Ag Committee meeting. First up for our consideration, House Bill 222, Colorado River Advisory Committee. Welcome, Speaker Summers. Come present your bill, please.
Madam Chairman, fellow committee members, thank you and thanks for having me. I'd like to bring to you House Bill 222, which is Colorado River Advisory Committee. And really where this bill started was, I would guess, perhaps 3 years ago when Senator Hicks and I brought forward a bill that we eventually did not get through the process to create an advisory committee on the Colorado River. And since that time, the governor has stood up a working group, a Colorado River working group, but it's not really, was never intended at the beginning at least to be an advisory group where you actually have water users try to advise on issues related to water. It was more, it was intended originally to be, I think, more like a group that received information and then put information back out to constituencies. So that was the original work group of the Governor Gordon. And so coming into this session, I crafted two bills, and the first one Representative Senator Hicks and I were both on. And then after consultation with the governor's office, it was maybe too strong a position. And so I moved this back to more of just an advisory committee. But I think an advisory committee is incredibly important. And I think it's important that it's in statute that we have the role of being advisors. And that is all of the water users on the Colorado River at this critical time when reservoirs are lowering, hydrology is not looking good. There's a lot of pressure from above, from the federal government on that river system. I think it's incredibly important that we have a voice, we water users have a voice at the table. And not only a voice at the table, but that we can be actively involved, I hope, in participation. And so what the bill before you just goes in, and Madam Chairman, if you take a look on page 1, and it basically goes into Article 3, and it creates the Wyoming Colorado River Advisory Committee. And you'll see in 41-11-302 that's created, subsection A, the Wyoming Colorado River Advisory Committee is created within the State Engineer's Office. State Engineer's Office shall provide administrative services and staffing for the committee. And then you'll see that the purpose of the committee is to advise and inform the governor, the state engineer, and the Wyoming's commissioner to the Upper Colorado River Commission regarding the beneficial use, development, protection, and conservation of water from the Green and Little Snake Rivers and their tributaries relative to Wyoming's rights and obligations under the Colorado River Compact and the Upper Colorado River Compact. And then it goes on in subsection C and says they may request certain things. And I think the biggest thing is, like, if we go to the committee, and that would be really on page 3 and subsection E. I don't want to waste all your time and repeat everything. You've read the bill. And the committee shall consist of 10 members. And you'll see how we've rolled that out. Two members represented agricultural interests from the Green River upstream of Fontenelle, one downstream of Fontenelle. And then if you go to page 4, one member representing agricultural interests from the Little Snake River, while one member representing municipal water users from the Green River and its tributaries, one member representing municipal water users that divert water from the Little Snake River. And it's really interesting to know, and I know, Madam Chairman, that you know this fact, but it's really interesting that almost 50% or maybe more than 50% of Cheyenne's water comes out of the this Little Snake River through a series of really interesting diversions, let's call it that. So pretty fascinating. So it's, the biggest city in our state is obliged to water that comes out of the Colorado River. And so obviously those users need to be a part of this conversation. And then 2 members representing industrial users. And as you good folks know, in the mining industry, in the Trona fields, water is used a lot. They're really, they do a good job at conserving water. But in the end, when they get a lot of that hard rock mining done, they go down in and pump water in, and they can dissolve Trona and pump it out. Senator Kolb knows all, Madam Chairman, Senator Kolb knows all about that. But anyway, they would be on this as well. 1 member representing recreational, wildlife, and environmental interests, and 1 member representing conservation districts. And so that was kind of a new addition over the work group. And I had a lot of feedback from conservation districts when I started to write this bill that felt they needed, because they are integral to how to develop, basically for water projects around the state and in this region, and they felt they should have a membership, and I agreed. And you can see then on to page 5 how the members is constructed. And then if you go into 41.11.303 state engineer duties, and you can see subsection A, the state engineer's designated representative shall provide information and data to the committee regarding potential or existing programs, issues, or decisions that may affect the beneficial use, development, and conservation of water. And then subsection B, I really like, to safeguard the rights and interests of Wyoming, Wyoming's agencies, and Wyoming's residents related to the use of water within the Wyoming's portion of the Colorado River. The state engineer shall seek advice from the committee before exercising his authority as may be necessary to comply with Wyoming's obligations under the Colorado River Compact and the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact. And then it goes on down, subsection C, may designate an employee to assist. Subsection D, may disseminate information. If you go on to page 7, 41.11.304, applicability of Public Meetings Act, the Wyoming Colorado River Advisory Committee shall not be considered an agency as defined under Wyoming State Statute 16.4 for the purposes of Wyoming Statutes 16.4, 401 through 408. When practical, meetings of the committee shall be advertised and open to the public. So, Madam Chairman, if there's issues with that, just to kind of fill you in on the whys of that, it's basically some of these discussions that go on within the state of Wyoming as it relates to our position as a state within these compacts. We want to keep that fairly tight. We want our advisory committee to be able to understand that, get feedback, provide feedback, but we don't want to give away negotiations if we're in the process of negotiations. So, Madam Chairman, that's the reason that particular piece is in there. Obviously, you'll see there was a section 2, and the state engineer has authorized 1 additional full-time equivalent. And you'll see the money attached to it. I fought pretty hard on my side to keep that. There was a fairly good attempt to peel that out, but I kept that. I think if nothing, we're going to be short of positions in that area, and particularly of the state. And then, Madam Chairman, that's really the gist of the bill. And I would surely stand for any questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Any questions? Any questions, Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Speaker Summers, just a broad question. So if I was listening to this and listening to what you just explained, how would you categorize, how would you, I guess, say the purpose of this committee is? Because I'm a little confused here, just listening to this the first time with some detail, that are we trying to, what, I guess, what's the purpose? I mean, with the governor, does the governor need recommendations? The governor, as I understand it, and the state engineer make these choices. And so what are you trying to give to the governor, I guess, for data that would improve the choices that would be made? Is that a better way of saying it? And then the mining's in situ, when they use water to mine Trona, just as a term of art that they use it for. So and maybe you could help me out with the background, just so maybe I can understand a little bit better and people listening can understand it a little bit better, the purpose for doing this.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, thank you. So the purpose is to bring the water users of the basin together, really the basins, because Snake River Basin's a little different than the Green River Basin, and bring those water users to the table to help provide, I guess, recommendations to the governor and the state engineer as the Colorado River and the politics in the Colorado River come to fruition. There's a series of decisions that are going to have to be made within our rights under the compact. And what this is going to ensure is that all of the water users, those good folks in Trona and those good folks in agriculture, that we're going to be at the table to at least be able to advise the governor and the state engineer on what's best. And then not only that, and I think what we're trying to work on in the work group, and I think it can flower even better under this, is if we're going to have this shortage of water, which it's clear we do, and we want all of these industries and call it and interests to be able to remain in the West over there. We want to find a way to have agriculture continue and Trona continue and the environmental issues that are on the river continue the best we can. We have to find out ways to make it where we all survive. And I think by bringing that group together, we have a better chance of trying to find solutions on what's best for ag, but still lets Trona survive. How do we maintain ag? How do we maintain Trona? And how do we maintain other users, drinking water in Cheyenne, for example? And so I think it's by bringing those groups together that we hope to really seek solutions to that shortage and how we can all conserve water perhaps. But ultimately it's about how we can advise as we get closer and closer, the guidelines that operate the two main reservoirs are getting close to having to be renewed. We're in the middle of an EIS process with the Bureau of Reclamation on the Colorado River. Many of the decisions on that could affect all of our users over there. And I think for us to have a seat at the table to hear what's coming our way, what's suggested, and to provide that feedback, and then to look for solutions for this shortage, I think is really important, Senator.
A follow-up, Senator Kolb? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Don't know how to, Speaker Summers. So to be clear, we've got 37,000 people living between those two communities, Rock Springs and Green River. So I hope they'd be very high up on the list. I do understand it's cooperation because the water's held by ag, and we got to work together. And so I just want to always emphasize the population down there. It's the largest population on the west side of the state in one area. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, absolutely. But to be honest, it's overshadowed by the population right here in this town that is dependent upon Colorado River water. And that's the idea, is how do we ensure, and it's going to be some tough conversations, but how are we going to be able to bring all of these water users together on the solution side and try to find some mechanisms where we can maybe move some water from ag to other interests, but at the same time, preserve our ag as well. And so that's the goal anyway. That's the goal.
All right, thank you. Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Speaker, this is just a comment, on this membership, having people from different industries and ag, they bring a different perspective than somebody that's sitting in Cheyenne. If they're constantly in Cheyenne, they may be very wise people, but they may not fully understand what it is to irrigate and have diversion out of the Green River and that kind of thing. So all these voices are very, very important. Thank you.
Wouldn't you agree?
Madam Chairman, I would agree.
All right.
And Madam Chairman, the level of concern out there, as you know, you've dealt with water issues, Madam Chairman. The level of concern in the agricultural community is intense, and it is in the industry as well, right? They're looking for solutions. Municipalities are worried, and we've got to figure a way to work together.
Mr. Speaker, yeah, and well-deserved concern. I have a couple, unless someone else has something. Okay, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Speaker Summers, good to see you. On that employee, that appropriation is for essentially that $200,000. Is that, what's the, is there a time limit on it, or is it, it doesn't really say in here, does that keep carrying over year after year? Maybe we get a good, 10 years and we don't have to deal with it. Likelihood is not that, but just that question there. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, it's an ongoing position. Let me look at that for sure, but I'm pretty sure of that.
Page 2, page 8, lines 6 and 7. Madam Chair.
Madam Chairman, it is intended to be ongoing. I don't think any time in the near future that we're not going to need more positions in the state engineer's office for water on the Colorado River. Ultimately, if it becomes like, as you all know, when we had, in DEQ, when we had the boom in the shale over on the northeast side. But anyway, we had specific DEQ agency members that were just for that play. And then kind of when that played out, they went away. It's a function of what we do and what the appropriators do. Do you need it now? Do you need it later? And they'll scrutinize those.
So, Madam
Do you have
Chair,
a follow-up? No,
just to
you're good?
follow up
All
on
right.
that.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Speaker, it does not say in the appropriation, it says, while it shall be included in the standard budget, is that $200,000 to be biennialized in the standard budget? The way this is currently constructed, it looks like $200,000 for this supplemental, but it doesn't say that that's to be biennialized. And so the way that's currently structured, it would only be in your standard budget for $200,000 for the biennium. So do we need to include that number needs to be biennialized?
Madam Chairman, I would say absolutely.
And Madam Chairman, I have another question. Mr.
All right.
Speaker, in the makeup of the committee, there's nothing in here that provides for what I would say the selection of a chairman. In other words, somebody needs to probably keep the rest, organize the committee. Is there something that we need to put in here that says, of these members, they shall elect a chairman for that committee?
Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
So Senator Hicks, whatever you think is needed there, I'm good with. I got this bill out kind of late after it was clear the other one wasn't going to pass muster. And so anything you guys can do to make it better, I'm all in.
All right.
All right.
And then
Any further? Go ahead.
one other question, and it gets back to the position, but if you go to page 6, subsection C, and it says the state engineer may designate an employee to assist, and then the appropriations actually to hire that employee. And I guess it seems to me that if we're going to provide the funding for this position, it should read the state engineer shall designate, because that's what the appropriation is.
Madam Chairman, I would agree.
All
All
right,
right.
all right,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chairman, that's all I have.
All right. Well, I have a couple of questions. First of all, just to clarify the difference between this group and the working group, because there's a good group of people on your working group that I've observed. And so clarify that for me, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Madam Chairman, it's my belief that that work group will morph into this. And, that'll be up to the governor, but the governor appointed those anyway. So I'm going to assume that this will just transfer. The one thing that's not in here, and, Senator Hicks may have noticed it, there's not a liaison from the legislature. So there's not even either an active member or a liaison. So, and I've thought about that later, and I figured you guys would, at that time, I hadn't really paid that much attention to it and thought, maybe there needs to be ensure we have legislative participation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was my next question, actually, because I think your Select Water Committee is intently focused on this issue as well. And so possibly some members from the Select Water Committee might be appropriate, and just thought I'd get your comments on that.
Madam Chairman, I think however you want to provide legislative, either liaisons or active members, that's, you have to watch the number, right? We don't want to
Overpower.
have too many members, but I think however you guys want to do that, but I agree with you. We need to have that connection.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is there any further questions? All right, seeing none, stick around. We'll probably have some amendments and we'll bring you back for that. Is there any comment from any of our agencies? Comment from the agencies, seeing none. Is there any public comment on this bill? Go ahead, Mr. Winnie, you can be first. And come on up and then you can go second. Welcome back to the Ag Committee.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, Madam Chairman. Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I would note that Sublette County contributes water to all three watersheds, Columbia, Colorado, and the Missouri River watershed. But you kind of asked a question about the purpose of the speaker, and he was very gentlemanly in his response. I would phrase it a little bit differently. It's my understanding that when the Colorado River Compact was set up in the 20s, the flow in the Colorado was much higher than today, and the allotments were set based on that. As I see it, we have never used, if I understand it correctly, Wyoming has never used its full up allotment. We're going to end up in court over that in all likelihood. So an organization like this, to get out in front of whatever legal action might be coming as other people want our water, is pretty important. So subject to your questions, thank you very much. I support the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Seeing none, thank you so much. Come on up. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. WACD supports this bill, and we just want to thank Speaker Summers for making the concession to add a member from the Conservation District community to this advisory committee. As the local experts on watershed management, we think it's important to have that voice, and so we support that, and I will stand for any questions.
All right, any questions from Ms. Little? Seeing none, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Any further public comment on this bill? Anyone online, Pierre? No one online? Seeing no one online and no further comment in the room, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill?
Move the bill.
Moved by Hicks. Do I have a second? Seconded by French. All right, are there any amendments on the bill? I see you scribbling, Senator Hicks. We know what that means. So we'll give you just a minute to finish your scribbling. Does anyone else have an amendment on the bill?
Madam
right.
Chairman, I've got a number of amendments here, but I don't have the language. So it would be my preference is just to discuss what those amendments would be with the committee. And then I'll bring it as a committee of the whole amendment. Because we're gonna try to wordsmith these things and they're not gonna fit right now. So, but the first amendment would be, I do think.
Before we start, Senator Hicks, let's bring Speaker Summers back up. He can join us for the discussion on this since it's his bill.
Madam Chairman, and we may be getting ahead of ourselves. Did you want to take testimony from any of the agencies or?
I've already asked
All right.
and no one came forward,
All right,
so.
all right. So Speaker Summers, I do want to include one member from the Senate. I think it's important that they reside in the Green River Basin. One member from the House appointed by the Speaker, appointed by the President. That would be one amendment that I'd like to bring to the bill. And then also regarding the committee, that once the first meeting of the committee, they shall elect a chairman and they'll serve a time of 4 years and then, serve up to 2 terms. Bring that in as a conceptual amendment. Maybe just some clarifying language as far as on page, where it starts on 5 and rolls over into 6, and just talk about not only the programs, but compact obligations and water administrations under the compact. So just kind of put a focus on that in that section. And then we talked about under subsection C where the state engineer may designate. If we provide the funding, it's just shall, would be an amendment there. And then Madam Chairman would bring in the language that it would be included in their standard budget and the $200,000 would be biennialized. Those are the amendments that I would propose, but rather than trying to wordsmith all those into the document, my preference would be is to just get those, I'll put those together as a committee of the whole amendment and bring that if that's the wish of the committee. And then I would like to get Speaker Summers's comments on any of those proposed amendments.
All right, we'll take Speaker Summers' comments first, and then we'll go back to the committee.
Madam Chairman, thank you, and Senator Hicks, I'm good with all that. You know, you and I've talked long enough on these issues. I'm pretty sure you'll help it, not hurt it. So.
All right.
Okay, thank you. And back to the committee, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Possibly adding to Senator Hicks's amendments or wording that this committee, how do you feel about this committee reporting to the Select Water Committee?
Madam Chairman, I think it's a good idea. Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. I think the two are going to have to, Madam Chairman, I think you're going to see in my appointments to Select Water, it's going to be focused on my side of the state a bit right now, because I think we are going to have some issues to deal with in Select Water that are going to be right out of this basin. And I think the more coordination we have between the two entities, the better off we'll be. So I think it's a good idea.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could we add that to your committee of the whole amendment, Senator Hicks?
Yep, we can.
All right.
And my thought is on that, Madam Chairman, just we may want to sunset those, so we revisit the necessity of providing those reports back to Select Water. Oftentimes we require reports and then 10 years down the road, it's not an issue anymore, but it puts a duty upon the agency and the committee to report back, and nobody reads the darn thing. So with any of these reporting requirements, I like to put a sunset date on there, so we have to come back and reevaluate whether the report's necessary or not. So I would add that as a friendly amendment to that, maybe sunset it out about
Senator French,
5 or 6 years.
would that be all right with you?
I would agree to that, yeah.
All right,
Good
okay.
idea.
Committee, any further comments to add to this amendment that we're crafting or comments on the bill? All right, we'll go to discussion on the bill since we're going to take that amendment to staff. Go ahead, discussion on the bill, Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, this is definitely needed. I mean, there is going to be a call on the river. I think that's pretty well, it seems to be our future. And I think we have to get ahead of this as much as we can. And it's money well spent to protect our uses. And I'd like to thank Speaker and folks for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. Any further comments? Further comments? Seeing none. Linda, would you call the roll, please?
Aye.
Senator Hicks,
Aye. Aye.
Senator Ide. Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes, no nos.
All right, the bill has passed. We'll work on that amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, you're welcome. Next up for our consideration is House Bill, I'm not finding it, 76, Licensing Board Amendments, and we're seeing our cosmetologist twice in 1 year. What a treat. So welcome, Representative Zwaniter. Feel free to take us through your bill and your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good afternoon, Senate Ag Committee. Good to be with you today. House Bill 76 is on licensing board amendments. And so just some quick background. Over a year ago, the Cosmetology Board came to me right about the end of session and said, we really need a one-sentence change in their Practice Act. And so they approached me early on, and again this summer checked in after I had won my reelection and said, can we push this bill? I was chairman of corporations at the time. Knowing that I hated to bring a bill that was just one sentence of statutory change and one Practice Act, I did at that point check with our licensing boards and say, is there any other, statutory cleanup? Most of you have been here quite a while, and so you know that it's a big deal when we open a Practice Act, and you don't do so lightly. And so what I set out to do was just clean up some of the rest of our licensing board statutes, and then LSO came and said, hey, here's some even more obsolete provisions. And so what the bill before you in its current form does is, well, now 2 policy changes, one of which I'll talk about, and then the rest are basically cleaning up obsolete language. I know there have been some concerns that I may have gone too broad, affecting 27 different licensing boards, Practice Acts, and so that was not my intent to make the bill overly extreme. And so I do have an amendment before you, members, that really does delete all of the changes to the kind of the obsolete sections, but does leave the one policy section there on page 4 regarding the cosmetology board. And they're certainly welcome to come up and discuss more, but right now they have to have a majority of their board appear to conduct examinations for cosmetologists. And as you can imagine, we have a lot of people becoming cosmetologists, and it takes a while, in some case months, for that board to meet to license, and keeps those people from going right into the workforce. While we were discussing the bill, before it came to session, but after it was drafted, in December, apparently the Board of Veterinary Medicine did meet. And so you will see on page 8, line 7, the House did do an amendment to this bill when our veterinarians came forward and said they were having some additional difficulties on getting veterinarians licensed with this 5-year statute, and asked for us to make it 3. So that was the one change that the House did that would also be, I would consider it a policy or a legitimate change to doing business. So with that, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to walk through all of the obsolete sections. If anybody would be interested, I can go through the bill page by page, but really those are the one section I would ask you to keep. And the original purpose of the bill was for the cosmetologists who are here to testify on its behalf. I'm not sure if the Board of Veterinary Medicine is here or not, if they want to discuss their change. But I am perfectly willing to amend out the other sections for another day when we open those Practice Acts. So at your direction, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to do whatever the committee wishes.
Thank you, Representative. Before we consider that, could you just tell us exactly on page 4 what lines we would be keeping?
Yes, Madam Chairman, and I don't have the engrossed version in front of me, but I believe it's in that Romanet A, and it's the wording, the examination shall be conducted by the board or a majority thereof. And so you'll hear from the board if they'd like to testify that it's mostly a computer test now, and this is just language that constricts their ability to license cosmetologists on time. Thank you.
Okay, so Representative, we're just striking that. In lines 1 through 6 is what you would be keeping, and we're just striking that examination portion.
Correct, Madam Chairman, and then on the amendment that was distributed, you can see that it takes out the rest of the bill.
Okay. And I appreciate you bringing that amendment. That eases my concerns on the bill. And because it had dealt with so many areas. And so we really appreciate your helping us out with that. Committee, are there any questions on the bill? The amendment deletes the rest of the bill except for the cosmetologist section. Are there any questions for the representative, Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Zwolitzer. Just a question here. Do you ever envision any of these boards that will have these formational changes ever coming back and needed, like going away and coming back again? And then you canceling out language that frankly was the formation information about how they were set up? Is there any of these that you think maybe could cycle again, or, come back, or are they forever going to be here in perpetuity? Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chairman, Senator Kolb. And so you'll notice some of this language, they haven't opened these practice acts, in 20 or 30 years. I believe we have 48 different licensing boards in Title 33, and it's maybe one every 2 or 3 years we've opened, because it's significant concern when you open someone's practice act, they want exactly what they want, and there's always this fear that other changes may happen to them. And so what I set out to do is just clean out all the obsolete language, got that kind of confirmed by the licensing boards themselves and LSO to ensure that we weren't doing any policy matters. I just know what it costs to bring a bill in time, and so I thought, hey, if I'm going to change one sentence of law, I might as well go ahead and try to clean all these up because we don't open them very often, was the original intent. But it's certainly the
Well,
legislature's purview to take in and take out a practice act and a profession at our convenience.
Go ahead, Senator Kolb.
Well, I guess we're saving ink or something in the statute books. But other than that, so there's no downside to removing this language of formation, none. That's my question. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Representative, go ahead.
Madam Chairman, it's my understanding that all this language originally anticipated was obsolete. And so it doesn't necessarily hurt, as you can read through it, to leave it in, to take it out. It doesn't make a difference in any of their practice acts, was the intent. The only two in this engrossed version were the cosmetologist and then the Board of Veterinary Medicine, who met in December, said, hey, there's a bill here, we actually could get this fixed while there's legislation before the legislature. And I believe the Nursing Home Board also had a concern they may have talked to some of you about, but I don't believe they're here today to discuss that.
All right. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, stick around and in case we have more, and we'll bring you back up to work the bill. Thank you, Representative Zonster. All right, is there anyone from the board that would like to come forward? Welcome back to the Ag Committee. We're glad we can be helpful. All right.
My name is Sharon Bennett. I'm the Executive Director for the Board of Cosmetology, and we sincerely appreciate you guys. We came across this several years ago when we started looking at the time it takes for our students to get into the workforce. And about the time we started making forward momentum to change it, COVID hit. So at that time, we all just went into survival mode, I guess. Coming out of COVID, when we decided to try to make this change, we found that one line in our statute. After the Attorney General informed us that office that we couldn't move forward without y'all's help, that's why this bill came. Our students now sometimes have to wait a month and a half to take their exams, and they have to travel to Cheyenne. Excuse my shaky voice.
Fine.
What we're trying to do is get them into the workforce sooner. We're trying to cut down their cost in travel. The schools have all been very much behind this, and the board is behind this, and we just think it's a great way forward for the profession.
All right. Thank you for that. And would you like to testify today as well?
No, I'm
All right,
back everything
you're
she
back up.
said.
All right, all right. Thank you so much. Questions for the board committee? Questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Is there any public comment today? Public comment on this bill? Come on forward. Oh, or A&I. Thank you. I didn't mean to neglect you. I didn't know you were involved in this bill, so come on forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Joanne Reed. I'm the administrator for the A&I Professional Licensing Boards. This is Chelsea Cortez. She's actually the Executive Director for the Board of Veterinary Medicine.
All right, welcome.
We are just here to ask that, if possible, the language that was amended on page 8, line 7, stay in this bill. This is the Board of Veterinary Medicine. They have, the way the statute is currently written is it requires that an applicant must have passed their exam, the national exam, within the last 3 years, or they must have been licensed and actively practicing in another state within the last 5 years. if we have an applicant that comes in that took their national exam more than 3 years ago, and they've only been practicing 3.5 years, we can't license them. So if we change this simple number 5 to a number 3, that would solve that problem. So that's all we really needed to say on this bill.
All right, okay. Any questions? Questions for ANI? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comments in the room? Seeing none, any public comment online? All right, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill?
Move the bill.
Moved by Hicks, seconded by me. All right, are there any amendments on the bill? Amendments on the bill? Representative, if you want to come back forward. Fellow senators, we have an amendment in front of you that Representative Wanitzer has been gracious enough to bring to us. I would move that amendment with the exception of page 8, line 7. We'll leave that in for the Veterinary Licensing Board. That would just be changing 5 years to 3. Do I have a second on the amendment?
Second.
It's been moved by me, seconded by Hicks. Is there any discussion on the amendment? For discussion purposes, this amendment would delete everything in the bill except for page 4, lines 1 through 6, and page 8, the change on line 7. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Discussion, go ahead, Senator Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm really disappointed that on page 5, line 10, the $100,000 couldn't have been talked about. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Senator Cole, that provision there is existing law. All they were doing was striking out January 1, 2009.
Madam Chairman, it was about the dollar amount. It hasn't been updated lately.
Oh, well,
That was my question.
okay, all right. Well, if you want to talk about it, we.
Well, no, I think we've done quite enough.
All
Just a
right,
comment.
okay, all right. Okay, so discussion is on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? The amendment has been adopted. Are there any further amendments on the bill? Amendments on the bill, seeing none. Any comments, Representative? Are you all right with our work here today?
Certainly, Madam Chairman.
All
I
right.
just appreciate you hearing the bill.
All right, thank you so much. Linda, please call the roll.
Senator French,
No?
Senator Hicks,
Aye.
Senator Ide. No. Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
That's 3 ayes and 2 noes.
The bill has passed. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 171, State Land Leases. Welcome, Representative Byron. Please come forward and present your bill. And do you have a copy of an amendment for us? Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for hearing the bill. I appreciate late in the game here, getting on to 171. House Bill 171 is a bill I brought, and it's taken many different forms. And the amendment I just passed out was discussed with the good chairwoman and has been discussed amongst a lot of the sponsors. And essentially, that amendment is going to be at the discretion of this committee. So I'm just going to go through the bill, if that is all right with you, Madam Chairwoman.
Go ahead.
So in gross version, this is a state land lease bill. This was a bill I brought after talking to many different people across the state, specifically to ag and also different leasing. And there's a lot of contentious issues here with it. But I'm going to start actually on page 2, line 17. And this is where the bill was heading in the House, which you guys can read it. Basically, that language from lines 17 through page 3, line 2, was something I worked on with OSLI and the deputy director over there, which in leasing, there was not currently a rule or regulation to give notice before an RFP and request for proposal went out on certain state lands. So that became an issue back up in my country. So we worked on that. So this would allow for a 30 days notice. You can read the language prior to when that lease gets opened up for the RFP. Carrying on, we can hop back up to the original page 2, lines 5 through 8. Some of this language got amended in got amended into the bill in a third reading over on the House side, and you can see it strikes 75, goes to 99. Line 7 adds residential in there. Going to page 3, jumping down to line 12. Once again, it talks about some recreational purposes for these lands. Going to staying on page 3, lines 19, goes on to some improvement language as it relates to these state lands. Carries on to page 4, and then there is some language on page 4 and into page 5 about the improvements that are made on these said leases and the values of them as you would move forward with them. I think it is going to be the pleasure of this good committee to decide how you want, what you'd like to do with the bill, with the amendment and or without the amendment. I have worked closely with a couple different agencies, and they're certainly here and willing to speak into the bill in its current form. And I'm happy to obviously stick around to speak to the bill and with the proposed amendment, should that be your pleasure.
All right, thank you, Representative. Are there any questions for the good representative today? I have one. It appears to me that possibly a bill was drafted into your bill and combined. What was that bill number? Can you remind us of that?
Madam Chairwoman, I cannot remind you that bill did not make it out of the drawer over on the House side.
Right, and so Representative, just my hesitation to bring this bill up was because that was added into the bill. Just wanted that to be on record. It's one of the things that the Senate frowns upon. We've had several concurrences that have had House bills amended into them. And so just having, being new around here, I just wanted to make sure to address that with you, and it's something that we watch very closely. So we appreciate your willingness to bring an amendment to strip that bill back out of this bill, and frankly, that's why we're hearing it today. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and that was much appreciated advice when we got to discuss this, and that is exactly what the amendment that is in front of you does, so thank you.
All right, so just walk us through, are we deleting everything except the new language on page 2 and 3, and just deleting part of lines 1 and 2? We're taking out all of the language after leasing of on line 1 and line 2, and then inserting state lands. Is that the bulk of the bill?
That is 100% correct, word for word, what that amendment in front of you, the intent of it does. And it obviously has some conforming language in there too. And but yes, that is, it changes a few things on page 1, line 11, but just because it has to, as the bill changes
Right.
forms.
Yes, I see that. All right, so committee, is everybody, do you understand what the amendment does while the good representative is here? All right. Any questions? Questions on the amendment, questions on the bill? All right, stick around. We'll probably bring you back up. Is there anyone from the agency that wishes to speak on this bill? And then we'll go to other legislators in the room if anyone would like to speak on the bill. welcome back. We've seen a lot of you this year.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Jennifer Scoggin, Director, Office of State Lands and Investments, and Jason Crowder, Deputy Director. I guess our concern or our desire, if you will, is has first of all to deal with page 2, lines 6 and 7, where it would change the length of the lease. Currently, we're limited to 75 years, and it would go to 99, and it would add in residential. Deputy Crowder and I have been approached by a number of local communities that are trying to address their affordable housing issues, and they've asked if we can help. Is there some way to help them block up land, or can they lease state land that's strategically located near infrastructure, near communities? So we're not talking about ag land that's out in the middle of somebody's ranch. We're talking about lands that are closer to the communities, which could potentially be used for affordable housing. And so that was one of the reasons why we liked and had been suggested to increase the lease term to 99 years, which would help with financing, and also that seems to be typical in these situations where you have residential homes built on lands that have been leased, and they pay a lease fee, if you will, annually, or whatever the situation may be. We do not have any issues with adding the notice provision that Representative Byron talked about. We're fine to do that with the RFPs as he's requested. Then on page 3, sort of giving a catch-all, if you will, in lines 12 and 4 through 14 on the definition of recreational purposes. Again, we've been approached for different opportunities, and our definition right now for recreational purposes is somewhat narrow and limited. The catch-all allows the board to entertain multiple opportunities. And then I think, Deputy Crowder, I'll turn it over to you. I think the rest of the provisions that we had talked about with Representative Byron really are conforming to House Bill 16, correct? Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The director's correct. You all have worked on House Bill 16, which was the improvement valuation on state lands, and we went back and forth with the House a little bit through conformance committees to define that valuation methodology. This bill hasn't kept pace with that, and so we do have an amendment for you if you were to keep this portion of the bill that would conform the language here, and it's in the sense of selling land to what House Bill 16 currently has, and we're happy to offer that to you as well. The only last thing that I think we should mention is that there is an insertion of a new subsection B on page 5. This is the limiting factor really in the office's ability or the board's ability to lease for residential purposes or that affordable housing effort. Right now, the valuation of that improvement and historically up until this session has been defined as the contributory value. If anybody's going to develop a piece of state land, and again, as the director mentioned, these are lands that are ripe for development. They are situated as such next to existing housing developments or within a municipality, and we have these in many towns across the state, Rock Spring, Cheyenne, Lander, all needing affordable housing, and our lands are prime for that. But this insertion opens up the definition of that valuation of improvements to include the definition of a market value. And as you may recall from our previous conversations, previous improvements don't reach the market. These improvements would, because the idea is that you would sell the land with the improvement on there, so you would have more than one bidder. So this opens the door to allow those developers to get compensated at a market rate for the development that they put on the property. It could be houses, it could be any level of development leading up to houses, including streets, gutters, water and sewer, power, and the like. But without insertion of something like this into the statute, this is why we haven't seen a lot of these or any of these types of developments on state lands to date.
All right. Questions for the agency? Senator French.
More of a comment. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just more of a comment. If the state leased something for 99 years, 100 years, and they built houses and infrastructure and everything else on it, I guess my question is, or comment is, would they, at that point, say, you may need to tear that down, we're not gonna renew the lease? I mean, it's almost like it's being sold if it's 100-year lease. I mean, all the stuff that could be done, we can't foresee 100 years in advance here, but I bet money that more likely than the state's not gonna say, well, the lease is up, reclaim it back to grass, what it used to look like, tear all of those 500 houses down, take those streets out, and blah, blah, blah. So any thoughts on, that's a long time.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, Senator French, currently our rules are such that while the maximum time frame within which you can lease the land is 75 years, our rules limit the lease to the economic life of whatever that improvement or development is going to be. So it may not actually get to 75 years, it may be something less. What we're proposing is to make that 99 years. In typical, and I've done some research on this, but typically there are situations where, the lands are leased, they're not sold as part of the housing development. And typically for financing, the banks like to see certainty. And so 99 years is sort of that typical level of certainty. And you can do this a variety of ways. Each time the home is sold, you can then extend the lease for an additional 99 years or something less, whatever the board might feel is appropriate. So there is flexibility within the rules and the economic life of the project or the home or whatever it might be. Deputy, do you have anything else to add to that?
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a question on the lease expectations. When there's a land lease, what expectations do you have, if any, on how that land is taken care of? Say, someone puts something on it, which is there anything objectionable to how they use the land lease development? I am concerned about land lease being frankly turned into a less than desirable area because of certain types of development that would have consequences on the surrounding land, plus the degradation of the state land use. I mean, what safeguards are there to address that? That's my question. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is not a new concept. Obviously, we lease for commercial development and have for quite some time across the whole state. We lease for a very specific purpose, and we don't allow the purpose to grow outside of that. So if it does start getting bigger, then we readdress, we amend the lease, or we pull back the use into what the intended purpose was. We also monitor. Each one of these commercial leases gets an inspection once every 5 years to not only determine that they haven't gone outside the scope of the purpose, but to also monitor for compliance for exactly what you're talking about, Senator Kolb. Has the site started to degrade? Have they left junk out there? Are they doing something nefarious that we wouldn't like to see? Obviously, our charge is to generate revenue and maintain value. And anytime these types of developments start going downhill, then that degrades the value of that property. And so that's one of the objectives that we look at in those inspections to ensure that that doesn't happen. The other thing is we also employ sister agencies to help us in that inspection. In commercial development world or in oil and gas, that's the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, that's the DEQ. Sometimes it's the State Engineer's Office and the Game and Fish Department as well to highlight things that maybe are offensive or may be environmentally harmful that we can address and bring the lease back up to compliance. But we have terms within the lease to guard against things like that.
I'll just play off of that last question. That hit part of it. Your experience in the past with situations of something similar with a housing development or commercial, how do you structure those deals currently, and how is this different from that? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Ide, each commercial development is kind of unique. That we have some that are similar, some that we do relatively often, like offset well pads or tank batteries or things like that. So those are generally run of the mill. But it takes about 4 to 6 months to get a commercial lease through our application process and in front of the board for ultimate approval. And it's because they're all just a little bit unique that need a little bit of attention in certain areas where others don't. We have our field staff as a part of that review. There's also a lessee consent that goes along with that. So we need to know how the new use impacts the existing users that are out there. Our appraisal staff are really heavily involved to ensure that the payments that the state are receiving are comparable to market rates if they can find one, or they determine the market rates if they can't find one. And then obviously the program managers who are writing the leases get involved to make sure that the terms are matching what those field experts feel need to be involved inside of one of those. So that's how it currently happens. Obviously, we've not done an affordable housing or a housing type development or a commercial development like we're talking about here, but we would expect a lot of the same checks and balances to occur, but also to include some local involvement. The counties are critical pieces to this to understand what planning and zoning regulations that they have in place, how this might help them, hurt them, how the development might occur as far as building codes, what needs to be in there and what shouldn't. There's a lot of areas in the state that are unique from each other. Obviously, we've had a lot of conversations about Teton County, and when we talk about development in Teton County, and this is my favorite example, we talk about bear boxes. We don't talk about bear boxes in Laramie County. So we need to have that local involvement so that we know what else needs to be in that lease. And that's something I think we would anticipate being another part of the criteria of the checks and balances as we move forward in the application review.
Go ahead, Senator Iden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chairman. When you refer to affordable housing, can you explain that? I mean, is that subsidized housing? Or is this market rate housing? What are you referring to there when you talk about affordable housing? Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator, I think the definition is rather broad, and I don't know that we could define it for you. What I do know is that there are housing needs in communities across the state where housing prices right now just far outpace the income for the people who need to live close to those jobs. We've been approached by specific entities indicating that they can present us with a proposal. They would do the affordable housing and we would get compensated on a lease basis. So they would make the definitions or the determinations on construction quality, size and scope and everything of the building that would meet an affordable bar for the specific spot they're in within the state.
All right, are we good? Oh, 2 more. Go ahead, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Real quick. You know, on line 2, 5 through 8, you know, it talks about bumped it from 75 years and leasing to 99 for industrial, commercial, residential, and recreational. Why are leases for grazing, or some rancher want to lease, why are they just 10 years? And we're talking 100 years here, 99.
That's a very good question.
Madam Chairman, Senator French, the reason they are 10 years is because the Act of Admission limits agricultural leases to 10 years. And then it has then been since carried through to Wyoming statute by the legislature, but it is limited by the Act of Admission.
Senator Kolb, did you have one more?
I do.
All right.
See if what type of job I can do to explain this, Madam Chairman. So if your job is to, as I understand it, to get the maximum benefit for the state of Wyoming, why would someone come to you to purchase or to get a lease agreement? It would seem like it would have to be at a discounted rate. Because why wouldn't they just go off and purchase said land somewhere else if they're actually getting fair market value for what they're purchasing X? Why would they go to you folks, why, when you are forced to get the maximum value for said property? So why wouldn't those two things be equal? I guess that's my question is, why? You know, what assurances do I guess I have, or the question on how we're going to get maximum benefit? Because it seems like the only reason why they would go to to state lands is to get a deal. So could you explain how you protect that and make sure that the maximum benefit is actually yielding, given to the state? That's my query. Thank you,
Go
Madam
ahead,
Chairman.
yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was a very good question. And an answer that is very hard to give you. What I believe is that we're not being approached by developers. The developers do own the land, or can own the land, and can pay market rates, and will build a house that will demand a market rate in a given market. What we are being approached by are the municipalities, the cities, towns, counties who need affordable housing and feel like they can influence the lease and the development on the lease to create an affordable housing scenario. We could sell our lands to those developers and make a lot of money at the very beginning. Right now, statute limits us to only that, to just sell it to them and receive the upfront payment and be done with it. What the proposed bill does is allow for continued ownership through development. And the longer you own through development, the more revenue you can derive, we believe. And so if that is for an affordable outcome or for a market rate outcome, the draft bill gives that opportunity where we don't have one now. Currently, these lands, as you're aware, are largely used for grazing leases. And it is a much less rate that we can charge for grazing as for any other commercial or residential development. If we're not being approached by a market developer and only a city that can influence a development process through a lease, then our best market or our best use of the property is to discuss it with the county or the city and determine if that lease is more marketable or more lucrative than a grazing lease or whatever that may be there. So I guess what we're anticipating with this bill is the opportunity is there to help cities and towns and counties, which is one of the management objectives that the legislature has given us, as well as the Board of Land Commissioners, and do so at a heightened revenue stream than what may currently be there. It may not be the best revenue stream that's possibly out there, but it is a good revenue stream that's better than what it was. We retain ownership for a specific amount of time that further increases that revenue stream and increases the sustainability of that parcel if we own it for the full length of the term, if it happens to be 99 years as well.
All right, I have go ahead.
Real quick to hit on that.
All right.
We're getting into the good stuff now.
All right.
So Madam Chair, excuse me.
Go
I was
ahead,
getting ahead of
Senator
myself.
Ide.
Thank you. In a scenario like that, would the city or the town be the leaseholder and they would be subleasing that to the developer of that housing project potentially? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, and we are starting to get into the weeds that we have not mowed at all. So I'm not really sure what all the opportunities are or what may come out. But you're right. We could lease to a town who could sublease to somebody else, and that's not unprecedented. Currently, we have a recreational lease, a lot of them with counties across the state. The most recent one is Albany County, who has subleased to a group that does recreational use on a very large block of state land. We like that scenario because we have a solid lessee who has the ability to stay and be economically viable to make the payments for the term of the lease. But they're not equipped to do the work on the ground, so they sublease to somebody else. If we were to go directly to that work on the ground, we start getting into clubs, we start getting into organizations that may not have the staying power a county or a town has, and presidents change and personalities change. And so we like that scenario, and we would anticipate that to move forward in something like this.
All right. Okay, so my question to you is back to if we amend the bill and we take the bill that was amended into the bill back out, that only gives us the language on page 2, 17 through 23, and page 3, lines 1 and 2 with an amendment there. that just would make that read for the leasing of state lands. With that change, this bill just covers notice, is that correct? That was the original intent of the bill.
Madam Chairman, that's correct.
All right, okay. That's the only question I had for you. Any further questions? Seeing none, you better leave before one comes up. Stick around because there could be more. I see two legislators that have come into the room. Would either of you like to testify on this bill? All right, Senator Guru, come on up. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Honor to be here. Honor to be here. Mike Guru, Senate District 17. Just really wanted to come and speak in support of the bill. One of the co-sponsors and the good representative, I thought, did a great job putting it together. And I know, as he stated, that it went through several morphs during its trip through the other side of from our chamber. But I'm glad to see and grateful to see you all are taking the bill up, that you're taking up the amendment to try to bring it back to its original purpose, and just say I support it. And really, the only comment I would make past that is that, you know, a couple of years ago, a bill passed through both bodies that talked about Teton County lands and trying to use through OSLI to try to get revenue for the state at the best possible rate, as they're required to do so by law. In doing so, as this committee knows all too well, because you've taken up an awful lot of bills regarding this subject, OSLI and the state of Wyoming in general has an operational tempo when they do things that is fairly quick. And in Teton County, sometimes things move at a little slower pace, a little more deliberate pace. And so really all this bill does in essence is just take out a 30-day window when doing contracts and RFPs, which helps a little bit, frankly, to kind of get people in line to help be able to, talk about it and have a full, robust airing of the issues. And so that's, that was the original intent of this bill, and that's why I stood for it, and I appreciate you taking a look at it, and be happy to answer any questions about it.
All right, thank you, Senator. Any questions? Any questions? All right, seeing none,
Thank you.
we'll let you go. Is there any public comment on this bill? Public comment? Please come forward. Welcome, Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chairman Steinmetz, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. First of all, before I make any comments, I have some questions. The proposed amendment would take this back to the original, and so a lot of my concerns would be alleviated. If the amendment passes to go back to the original 171, my concerns of the length of the lease, adding the residential, the no sideboards on recreational activities are alleviated. So I would sit in support of the bill, and I would sit for any questions the committee may have for me.
Questions, committee, questions? Seeing none,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Next up, for public comment, welcome to the Stock Growers and Wool Growers Association.
Thank you for introducing that, Madam Chairman. Jim Magagna, I'm the Stock Growers and Wool Growers. And I would basically echo the comments that the previous speaker made. We were very supportive of the original bill. I had the opportunity to work with Representative Byron on developing the bill and appreciated that. We believe that the amendments that were put in go into a whole different area beyond what the intent of this legislation was. They need to be considered. They should be considered in future legislation separate from this. So we would be supporting the bill with what I understand to be the amendment being considered today.
Thank you, Mr. Magagna. Any questions? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Further public comment. Welcome, Ms. Herman.
Thank you, Chairman Steinmetz and committee. Marguerite Herman here, Advocates for School Trust Lands. putting the focus on the beneficiaries of the trust lands, public schools. And as opposed to the previous speakers, I view it's a little unconventional, but the aspects that were included in the bill in the House, I view as an opportunity to explore a way to put these lands to use for their intended purposes, to generate revenue, and has the other benefit of helping some of these municipalities find ways to provide housing for some of their essential workers who otherwise can't afford to live in the place. They're landlocked for various reasons. And I view this, and having listened to the OSLI explain how they treat commercial property, you get a sense of the diligence they use when they evaluate a proposal in viewing not only the revenue generation of it, but also preserving the trust and doing a responsible job of maintaining the value of it, maintaining the revenue producing ability of it. So I think the more you find out about OSLI, you'll agree that they do a good job at evaluating that. And then the 99 years, I think, opens up other possibilities with that caveat that of the life of the project kind of a thing, so that, and then as to whether a person should be, to buy it, the 99 lease could renew. And there are all kinds of leases, but I guess I would view this as, I would encourage you to leave those features in, the recreational, the residential, and the 99 extension, alternatively, because it does have such promise, potential promise, is to maybe study in the interim as what does that look like and how does it help the trust asset. And just one thing, the leases, the revenue from that goes into an income accounting, is spent right away. The sale, which has to be done at a public auction generally, that goes into the corpus. So there are two processes that end up handling the revenue different ways. That's another thing to consider. But anyway, I guess I would just encourage you to include those features in as a way to really advance the constitutional duty and the trust duty, which has its own set of fiduciary responsibilities to produce revenue from this land in a way that helps the people of the state and the trust and the public schools. And then again, just at the risk of repeating myself, and if not, maybe look at this as something that you could explore in the interim.
All right, thank you for your comments. Any questions? Questions for Ms. Herman? Thank you very much. Pierre, is there anyone online? All right, any further comments in the room? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Committee, what is your pleasure on the bill?
Move the bill.
Moved by Hicks. Do I have a second? Seconded by French. Are there any amendments on the bill? Amendments on the bill?
Madam Chairman, I would move the proposed amendment number 3 to House Bill 171.
All right, do I have a second? Moved by Hicks, seconded by Kolb. All right, is there any discussion on the amendment? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got mixed feelings about this bill. I don't know if the amendment takes care of all of my concerns. What I'm worried about is the towns and cities sort of getting into the real estate business where it should be left to the private sector, where, if they need that, or if a developer wants it, he should approach the state and try to work out a deal on purchasing that property, instead of sort of these layers of governments sort of in the middle of the deals. I've seen a lot of those, and they're all well-intended. Don't get me wrong. I think this bill is very well-intended, but I'm concerned about those aspects of taking it out of the, just out of the private sector and the governments. I know they're trying to help out their housing problems, but I think that needs to be done without the cities and towns doing that for the private sector. So probably a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Well taken, Senator Ide. I'd like to bring Representative Byron back up to explain again what his amendment does and what is remaining in the bill and what it does. So could you please explain that to us, Representative?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yes, and Senator Ide, I appreciate those concerns and note them. This amendment does essentially answer a lot of the questions you just brought up. And I'm sorry because the bill is long, and this does shrink it down to, let me get to the page real quick, to just page 2, line 17 through page 3, line 2, which would be that 30 days notice. So I would suggest that it does alleviate the concerns you have with the bill and you just brought up with that amendment that you guys are currently on. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We appreciate that. Senator Ide, did we get your questions answered?
so.
All right. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? No more discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. So all that remains of the bill is the new language on lines 17 through 23 on page 2, and lines 1 for the leasing of, and then it says state lands on page 3. That is all that remains of the bill with the adoption of that amendment. Are there any further amendments to the bill?
Madam Chairman?
Senator
If I
Hicks.
may, and Representative Byron, this is just a formatting and consolidation amendment, keeps everything in there. So, Madam Chairman, what I would suggest that we do is
Are you ready, Linda? Okay, go ahead.
on page 2, line 17, starting with any, strike that all the way through, can't even, regulation.
Any such rule or regulation, strike out on
Yeah.
line 17. Got it?
And so, Madam Chairman, then we'll go down to the bottom of the paragraph and we're going to bring that sentence up. So what it will now, we're going to insert,
Give us the line number.
well, I'm just going to read it in because there's a couple of changes to that line. So that sentence will now start with when.
On line 23,
Yeah, but we're going to bring that up. So
right?
we're back up on 17 now. So this is going to say when the Office of State Land and Investments initiates a request for proposals for the leasing of state lands
Okay, which takes us to lines 1 and 2 on the next page.
correct.
Okay,
Then it will say the office. And now we're back to line 17 and bring in the word shall. Strike require, well, we could leave that in. Shall require, leave all that language in, shall require not less than 30 days after days, insert provide. Notice, semicolon.
okay.
Romanet I. So we're going to start with Romanet I, and then it'll say Romanet I on the website of the Office of State Lands and Investment, period. After the period, we're going to insert Romanet II. In a newspaper of general circulation in the county or counties where the state lands are to be leased, period. Strike and insert Romanet III. To current lessees of the state lands and owners of adjoining lands by certified mail. So, Madam Chairman, what that will now read is, I'll just read that. It'll say, when the Office of State Lands and Investment initiates a request for proposals for the leasing of state lands, the office shall require not less than 30 days, provide notice. 1, on the website of the Office of State Lands and Investment. 2, in a newspaper of general circulation in the counties or the counties where the state lands are to be leased. And 3, to the current leasee of the state lands and owners of adjoining lands by certified mail.
All right,
that's what
Linda,
it-
did you get that?
That's what it reads now.
Okay, Linda has it. Committee, do you understand the amendment? Understand that amendment? Is there a second on that amendment?
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Hicks, seconded by Kolb. Representative Byron, is that a friendly amendment to you?
Madam Chairwoman, yes, thank you.
All right. Any discussion? Discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has been adopted. Are there any further amendments on the bill? Seeing none, is there any discussion on the bill? Discussion on the bill? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So after hearing all the debate, I'm still concerned that this is a subsidy for land developers. Seems obvious by the choice that they would go and, seek a sublease for developing this housing. On top of that, I do realize it's obviously more money than the grazing would yield. But is it really to the maximum benefit of the state of Wyoming? I still remain unconvinced that it is. And
Madam Chairman?
I'm not done talking yet.
All right.
Then I fear that there's going to be potential litigation for someone challenging this by it not being the maximum benefit for the state. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
All right, Senator Kolb. Senator Hicks, go ahead.
Yeah. Senator Colvin, just for members, for clarification, the only thing this bill does with the adoption of the amendment brought by Representative Byron, the bill is just that on page 2. It's just that is all this bill is. It's just a notice bill now that says prior to leasing, they just have to notice for 30 days on the website, in a paper, and by certified mail. That's all the bill is now. All that other stuff is gone. So just make sure that what we're voting on, that everybody knows that's all that's left.
Yes, that's my reading of it. That's what Representative Byron has indicated to us. Representative Byron, I think one thing that would help us with this bill and our vote on the bill would be for you to tell us why you brought the bill. We had a discussion, you and I privately, that it is to help ag lessees and give them notice that was not being provided before. So could you explain that to the committee?
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. This is a very complicated section in our Green Book, as we probably all know, but, the intent of the 30 days notice, which I think has been clarified, is that it allows, without that 30 days notice, the reason for the bill was it was catching certain folks that had leases or potentially would like to lease off guard when someone would come in and go before OSLI to lease the piece of land. So the intent of that 30 days notice across the entire state is that it just allows for that mechanism prior to it being opened up for the bid process, allows communities, if you will, to know that bid process is coming because it has caught people off guard.
Thank you, Representative. All right. Committee, any further discussion? Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Linda, would you please call the roll?
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, no noes.
All right, the bill has passed. Thank you, Representative.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, go ahead,
I'm
Senator.
assuming that Representative Byron here has a Senate member that's going to manage that on the floor for
I
him.
will organize that.
All right, thank you very much. Committee, just a few housekeeping announcements before we adjourn today. we have Monday, February 27th, upon noon recess, we will have our meeting just of the Senate to talk about interim topics. On Tuesday, February 28th at 8 a.m., we will meet jointly with the House Ag Committee to talk about interim topics. And then on Tuesday, February 28th at 1 p.m. in the Capitol Extension Room 4 here, we will have the annual Forest Health briefing with the National Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. So we hope all of you will stick around for those. Thanks, everyone, for your participation. Our meeting is adjourned.